Well, thank you very much. Well, let me just take it in some order. The first question was one of the three questions from Nancy asked that what do we think has been the impact of the global COVID-19 pandemic on the financial soundness of Nigerian banks? But let me respond to this by saying that ordinarily what some critical analysts will say is that as a result of the lockdown, both people and companies will not earn revenue, and because they are not going to earn, or they are not earning revenue, they will not be able to pay salaries, and if they cannot pay salaries, they will not be able to pay their loans if they took bank loans, and of course, if they cannot pay their bank loans, that it will result in non-performing loans in the books of the banking industry. But we believe that realizing that this could be the consequences of the pandemic, not just on households and businesses, but also on banks, we took the unanimous decision, supported by our board and MPC, to say that the CBN should consider the possibility of granting some kind of provisioning dispensation for banks. What does that mean? That banks are given the opportunity that if, for instance, companies or households or businesses that are impacted by the pandemic, that the bank should give, if they cannot pay their loans, that those loans should be restructured with the understanding that truly they have been adversely impacted by the COVID and that they cannot service those loans, or they have not even been able to pay salaries, let alone servicing their loans. We also took a decision to say that let us reduce interest rates on CBN intervention facilities from 9 to 5%. We also said that in order to encourage people to come back again to business, that there are those who lost their jobs, whether you are working in a hotel, you are a waiter, or you are a cleaner somewhere, you lost your job, that we should be able to make available to them what we call 100 billion naira targeted facilities for household and SMEs. This facility has been granted, and we're talking about 500,000 naira to somebody who wants to start a petty business, and up to 1.5 billion naira to some of them who are going to be undertaking some slightly higher level of business. We also decided that we would grant additional loan facilities even to some of our large companies. We decided that 100 billion naira should be set aside for companies that are in the healthcare and the pharmaceutical sectors. So what we have done, in essence, is to look for one way to reflate the economy so that people who lost jobs or people who could not pay salaries can come back again. And we believe that with the loans restructured, at least for some time, interest rebates on their loans and the rest for about 1 year, that the level of NPLs will in fact, at worst, remain stable, or at best, we could even see it coming down. So as a result, how has that affected the financial soundness of banks? We have a data that shows, for instance, that the Nigerian banking industry remains strategically strong and able to support the Nigerian economy. For instance, in June 2019, capital adequacy ratio for the banking industry was 15.3. But as at August 2020, it has still remained at 15.3. Non-performing loans as at June 2019 was 9.4. And like I read in the communique, today it is 6.1. Liquidity ratio was 48% in June 2019. Today it is 36%, and understandably so, because we have seen an increase in credit over the last 13 months, 12 months to 13 months, of about 3.7 trillion naira into the economy. Return on equity of banks, which was at 24% as of June 2019, today stands at 21%, which we still consider very good. Return on assets of banks which was 2.3% in June 2019, today is at 1.9%, which we still adjudge to be fair. Total deposits of banks have risen from 22.9 trillion in June 2019 to 28.9 trillion in August 2020. Total loans have increased from 15.4 trillion naira in June 2019 to 19.33 in August 2020. Total assets have also risen from 38 trillion in June 2019 to 48 trillion in 2020, August 2020. So these for us are signs that shows that at least to date, the economy, the banking industry remains resilient to support the growth of the Nigerian economy. The other question that Nancy asked related to the fact that she said in March 2020, just about the period of the outbreak, that the CBN took certain measures to support the economy, and that what has been the impact of these measures on the economy, positive or negative. Like you all know, the pandemic resulted or created a global health crisis, which ultimately dovetailed into a global economic crisis. And like we've always said, we've reeled out all the various actions that we took: interest rate on interventions, restructuring of loans, granting of targeted facilities. And let me repeat myself because I said so in the communique. We provided 100 billion naira for targeted facilities, and to date, 78 billion has been disbursed to 130,000 beneficiaries. For the 100 billion naira healthcare, 44 billion naira has been disbursed to 16 pharmaceutical firms and 25 hospitals, and we believe this will help go a long way to address some of our health and pharmaceutical crises. Out of the 1 trillion naira agric facility that agric and manufacturing facilities that we said the bank should be able to benefit from, this company should be able to benefit from, we've so far disbursed 216 billion naira, and this has been disbursed to 53 manufacturing companies, 12 agric-related companies, and 13 services projects. On our agric and small enterprises fund, we have so far disbursed to 144,600 beneficiaries, a total of 54 billion naira, and these are the loans that we said were granted by way of giving the real implements needed either for poultries or for hairdressers or those who are doing fashion and the rest of them. And of course, for the creative industry, we have also granted loans to about 250 youth companies, and they have benefited to the tune of about 2.9. So what has been the impact? I would say it has been positive, because truly, if this had not come, perhaps, one, we may not have seen the positive GDP we saw during the first quarter, or a somewhat reduced contraction that we saw during the second quarter of 2020. So I would think that these things have been quite impactful, and we should really commend those who have played an active role. And I think I must commend our colleagues in our development finance department who have done a great job in this. Now, Arise asked a question. It says the economic sustainability plan was benchmarked on about 2.3 trillion naira, and that out of it, the CBN, which should be through some kind of debt funding, should be funding close to about 1.8 trillion to support and catalyze the economy. And she asked, how does CBN plan to achieve this? Again, repeating myself, we have already disbursed a substantial sum of money, and we would repeat and say that these funds have not been fully drawn, and it is just a request, and we would like to appeal, like we also appeal in the communique, that there is available funding at low interest rates. All we need is for businesses and those who plan to conduct businesses to get back to business. As government improves the level of easing of lockdown, we should get back to our businesses, talk to our deposit money banks, and we ourselves will also be talking to them. We are holding meetings for them, with them regularly, for them to see to it that the Nigerian economy must get back on its feet, and that we all need to work together to grow this economy. And so business owners, stakeholders in the business community would like to appeal to you, because, for instance, out of the 1 trillion naira that we made available to the agric and manufacturing companies, only about 216 billion has been drawn. So which means close to almost about 800 billion naira is still available. And we would like to say that you should all join us to work together on this. Chinemerem Arise also said that during the CIBM annual conference, I had said that agric loans had grown from, say, 1% to 4%, and that there is a need for us to see how to even encourage the banks to increase lending to agriculture to 10%. You will see that whether we like it or not, any analyst looking at the Nigerian economy will say that for us to achieve growth, for us to create employment, we cannot ignore the agric sector. And that is why you all would observe that since 2015, when President Muhammadu Buhari assumed power, all that he has concentrated on, at least in the area of economy, is to say that we should revive the agricultural sector. And the Central Bank of Nigeria has held itself out over this period and done a couple of things, either through supporting, through Anchor Borrowers Program, to make smallholder credits available to our smallholder farmers, whether for rice or for tomatoes or for maize or for sorghum or for cassava or fish. These facilities have been made available. And these have been responsible for increase in agri credit from 1% to 4%. And I have a few numbers. For instance, in May 2019, loan to agro services was 324 billion. But as at today, August 2020, right, loans to agro services had gone up to about 430 billion. For crop production, outstanding aggregate loans to this sector was 163 billion in May 2019. August 2020, it had grown to 294 billion. For cash crops, loans to this cash crop subsector was just 90 billion in May 2019. As we speak today, it is 129 billion. And of course, there are other sectors as well where we saw loans at 79 billion, but today stands at 91 billion. So what am I saying? In aggregate, we've seen loans to the agric sector rising, right, just within this short period, from about 658 billion naira to about 900, almost 1 trillion naira during this period. About close to 300 billion naira loans have been granted to support the agric sector. And I can expect that with what we're doing to ensure that we support the agric sector, we just will continue to appeal to more and more people to come in, whether you have your own funding, don't put it in the bank account, bank deposits, go out and get involved in some of agricultural activities. You can be involved in the process of, if you are not involved in primary agric farming, you can also be involved in the business of making food, moving food from farm to market. You can be involved in the business of processing these agricultural products. You can be involved in the business of moving these agricultural products to the supermarket and the rest of this will create opportunities for wealth creation and also help to grow our economy and also create jobs to employment stimulating sectors of our economy. So I want to thank you. I hope I've tried to respond to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this briefing. It remains for me to thank you and I wish you well. Please remember to wash your hands with soap for at least 20 seconds.
Sir, at the MPs, I think it's important for me to reiterate this. In the communique, we talked about the fact that the MPC gave the management the mandate to see to it that everything is done to to stabilize the exchange rate in the country. And I thought it's important for me to address it because there are unfolding events arising from this. And what I'd like to reiterate from that what MPC requested management to do is that today, whether I would like it or not, the global crisis has come. And usually when there's a crisis of this nature, because, for instance, there's pressure on exchange rate, what we've had to do is to adjust exchange rate. So what we have done, we have adjusted prices. But if you've adjusted price, there's a need for you to also look at how do you work on supply and demand. In working on supply, we are seeking to how can we diversify the base, our revenue base in foreign currency. And we're thinking of how to really give support to those who are interested in doing more export business. We would like to encourage them. Before now, we've seen people doing exports, but we need now to even be more aggressive to support export activities so that we can grow our foreign currency revenue base from export. It is important that I say this and that there is no need for anybody to go into undocumented export activities in the country. We've seen situations where people get into undocumented export activities through open accounts, and the central bank will be working with Nigerian customs and the shipping lines and shipping agencies that when you conduct an export activity, you must fill your NXP forms. And that the shipping lines will not be allowed to carry your export out of the country unless you fill NXP forms. And that if we discover any exporter involved in open accounts where he does not fill NXP forms, we will deal with those exporters. We want all the process of exports and foreign currency revenues to go into an account where all of us will see it. It will be visible for everybody. That's on the supply side. On the demand side, we're also saying that there's a need for us, and you all will recall that since 2016, we've been talking about reducing imports, particularly of goods that we can produce in the country. And there is a need for everybody to work together to ensure that we all begin to embrace the consumption of foods that we produce in the country. And that is the reason the presidency, the government, the CBN, monetary and fiscal authorities are saying, we are ready to provide funding for you as long as you want to go into agric, so that we can increase food production that our people badly need. So we will frown at people who think that they can import items that can be produced in the country. And we have heard the president speak about this, saying several fora that the Central Bank of Nigeria will not be allowed, should make it difficult for people who want to take foreign exchange from the Nigerian foreign exchange market to import food. We will continue and with a lot of intensity to see that this is done. And we would like to please appeal to everybody. We all need to work together. And when we produce these goods locally, it behoves on us that we must patronize our own locally made goods. And what does that also mean? That the central bank will come out very strongly on those who are involved in smuggling or in dumping of goods that have been restricted to Forex. And they will be dealt with in line with the law, and we would like everybody to please seize the opportunity to be patriotic, that we need to support and embrace and consume food that is produced in Nigeria rather than food that is imported as in being smuggled to the detriment of our Nigerian-made goods and therefore make our locally made goods uncompetitive in pricing. So I just thought I should talk about this so that we all know where CBN stands on these issues. I thank you all again.